Good morning, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Rita Cruz and I'm the Chief Examiner for Written Subjects. So I'd like to welcome you all here today. It's lovely to have everyone here. It's a very exciting time for the AMEB and we're very proud of these latest resources. You can see them all lined up over here. And these are now the official AMEB publications to prepare students for the first 3 grades of theory exams. And the person that's responsible and the author of these publications is my very dear friend and colleague, Andrew Raiskums. I'll get him over here. Andrew is the theory editor at Federal AMEB and we fondly call him the theory guru because there's virtually nothing about music theory that Andrew doesn't know. His knowledge of repertoire is also quite staggering and I, in fact, have always stood in awe of him, but don't tell him that. But Andrew has other talents apart from qualifications both in music and in science, which is interesting. Andrew is very well known as a choral conductor in Melbourne and he's the Director of Music at St Peter's Eastern Hill and the Director of the Gloriana Singers, which is a very highly acclaimed choral group in Melbourne and they do some superb performances. You can go online and have a look. Andrew's background includes some 20 years of teaching piano and theory, particularly at Melbourne Girls Grammar, and he's taught all levels from beginner through to tertiary students. His experience also covers the preparation of performance editions of Renaissance choral music, transcriptions and arrangements for choirs and instrumental ensembles. Andrew's a very busy person, which is why he won't answer my emails. In fact, there's little in professional music that Andrew hasn't been involved in over his lifetime. That's so, isn't it? So I think I can do nothing better than to quote from the book itself by saying that these publications present a distillation of Andrew's experience as a teacher, his work preparing exams for the AMEB, and his work as a very professional musician. And just before I actually hand over to Andrew, I'd also like to thank Leah Phillips, the marketing manager who's come up from Federal Office, who's been the one that's been, putting you all in your seats and organising this event. Thank you, Leah, as well. All right, so after all that, I'd like you to please make Andrew welcome and we'll turn the day over to him. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Excuse me.
Thank you very much, Rita. I must say it's a joy to be in warm and sunny Sydney, away from grey and gloomy Melbourne. So thank you all for having me. Yes, when I joined the AMEB in 2009, it was coming from a background of teaching. I taught piano, theory, oral stuff, everything basically, for more than 20 years. And so when I arrived in the AMEB Federal Office, I thought that it would be a really good idea for us to look into producing our own theory syllabus. As the way things happen, it's taken quite a while to get there, but we got there. And it's taken a lot of resource and time, but I'm really pleased with the results. And have any of you had a chance to have a look at the new book yet? No? Okay. Well, I hope that you can appreciate what we've done and that they may prove to be useful to you in your teaching. So let's get underway. Why have we done these? Well, we've written these books, the people who have written these books, as Rita sort of has alluded to, they're written by the people who write and mark the examinations. They're the only books to address every aspect of the current AMEB syllabus. I thought it would be important for us to actually align these books as closely to the syllabus as possible because the syllabus has changed over the years somewhat, not so much for grades 1, 2 and 3, but much more so for grades 4, 5 and 6 theory and also our theory diplomas, which some of you may be aware of. We've included a past exam paper in the book, an actual past exam paper for students to do a full exam. We've also made sure that the way we've written these books interfaces seamlessly with the online theory examinations. And what we've done, well, actually, I should just add a bit here, that I felt that feedback that I was getting from teachers and from students is that how do we teach the creative stuff in theory? It's vexing. We don't know how to teach students to write decent melodies. 4-part harmony is a mystery. Can you give us some more resources, ideas, etc.? And so when I was writing the first couple of drafts of these books, I thought that it was very important for us to actually hone in on that and expand the material on, you know, accents in rhyming couplets, melody writing, 4-part harmony. You'll see that I've put a lot of material there for you on those topics. Okay, so let's have a look. What's inside the books? So just raise your hand. Has any of you had a chance to have a look at the books yet? Yeah, a couple. Okay, right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through all 3 books. We're not going to go through every chapter. I'm just going to go through sort of the ones where I feel that it's worthwhile drawing your attention to. Each lesson covers a different aspect of the syllabus for that grade. The lessons lay out the information required in a logical, step-by-step sequence using plenty of diagrams to illustrate each point. Where necessary, there are preliminary exercises in the body of the lesson that break down larger concepts. Each chapter ends with a set of questions, drilling the concepts for that chapter and also including some revision questions from previous chapters. And each book ends, as I've already said, with a sample paper, a sample exam paper. And we've made the solutions for every question available online. So you can download those for free. I thought that was rather good that we were offering that. So let's go through the books, starting at grade 1, and we're just going to go through a few chapters from each book. Now, grade 1, the very first chapter I felt was necessary was a chapter that sort of did all the housekeeping, as it were. So I called it Getting Started, and it's basically just setting up all the rudiments that teachers, students are going to need to start the course. So I introduced writing clefs, treble clef, bass clef. And this is a really interesting one because a lot of teachers and students are using online platforms to start their study of music, and they don't draw clefs these days. Right, they're already there for you, and so, you know, a student can recognise a treble clef and a bass clef and an alto clef, but they can't draw them. But I still felt that it was really important that they are able to draw these clefs, particularly the treble clef. And I don't know if you remember, when I was a kid, we had to do it sort of very, very rigorously. And my teacher, I remember, made me draw a vertical line like that, and then all the curves were around the vertical line. Well, in all of the software that I've seen, the treble clef now has a diagonal line. It's not actually a vertical line. So I've addressed this in the first chapter. It's a slightly diagonal line, but all the other concepts are the same. The bass clef, yeah, well, look, you know, we just have to make sure that kids are doing the 2 dots as well as the clef shape itself. I've also introduced, I've spoken about the double bar lines and how students need to know the 2 equal lines and then also the final bar line, which has the thicker line at the end. They are both double bar lines and students need to know about both of them. All right, let's skip ahead to lesson 5, which is the C major scale. In grade 1, it's just C major, G major, F major. I don't think there's going to be anything in this chapter, that's going to challenge anybody or that looks altogether that different from what we've done previously. I'm just looking at it and I'm thinking that, yeah, there should be nothing in there that sort of challenges anybody. All right, so let's then go forward through the other two scales to lesson 9 on intervals. Now, intervals are always going to be a little bit vexing for us because of a single word in the syllabus that seems to have created great confusion over the years, and that is the word diatonic. The syllabus asks us, it asks candidates to learn diatonic intervals above the tonic note for the grade. Now, if I had $1 for every time I've had a teacher email me and say, my candidate, my student wrote F to B, that's a 4th, end of story, and also G to F, that's a 7th, it's correct, give me the marks. Well, no, according to the syllabus wants diatonic intervals, and the diatonic intervals are specific to the scales that we've introduced to the level. So, for example, if we're looking for a 4th above F, we need B flat. And the 7th above G, we need F sharp. And I've made sure that I've explained this very carefully in the intervals chapter, that this is what we're looking for, and this is why the answers that you think may be correct are not correct in this context. All right, and then let's go through to lesson 10. Lesson 10 is about chords. Now, I think 3 years ago we almost started World War III in an exam when we asked candidates to write a triad in minims. Now, we hadn't done that before. It's usually semi-breves that we ask. And so, yeah, there were people who were seriously unhappy with us for doing that. But this, again, the syllabus doesn't specify what note values we can use, so it gives us latitude to ask candidates to write chords in minims and in crotchets. So what I've done is I've explained how to cope with the beaming. And this is another aspect of the syllabus that is a little bit mysterious. There's nothing in the syllabus about beaming. The syllabus is silent about beaming. And so what I've done in these books is I've, where necessary, I've spoken about how you beam notes together, how you, particularly in this chapter, how you average out the beams to write a chord with minims or crotchets. So it should just sort of getting rid of that mystery that's sort of been a problem in the past. All right, now let's go forward to lesson 11 on rests and anacrusis. Crotchet rest, minim rest. I had an email the other day from a teacher who said that it was wrong for us to be teaching candidates to use the minim rest to signify a whole bar of rest in 2/4 time. Well, I then said to her that the syllabus doesn't actually have a whole bar rest or a semi-breve rest for grade 1. So if we're going to do that for a 2/4 bar, we have to use a minim rest to indicate a whole bar of rest. We could use 2 crotchet rests, but another thing that I've followed through these books is that when candidates are writing rests, they should always aim to use the least amount of rests possible. And so that's something that I've stuck to quite rigorously through these books, because yeah, we get exams where, for example, a bar of 6/8 time, a candidate has put in, say, quaver rest, quaver rest, quaver rest, and said, that's correct, isn't it? Well, it kind of is. There's an extra layer, and that is that we need the music to look like the way it looks in the outside world. That is that rests need to be grouped, they need to be condensed, and candidates need to be using the least amount of rest possible. So also I talk about, in a 3/4 bar, for example, if you put a crotchet at the beginning of a 3/4 bar, how are you going to fill that bar with rests? Well, most of the software platforms these days will automatically go crotchet, rest, crotchet, rest. So you've got crotchet, crotchet, rest, crotchet, rest. It's not okay to put in a minim rest over beats 2 and 3, but it is okay to use one over beats 1 and 2. And so I've talked about that a lot. The concept of strong beats and weak beats, rests, notes, all that kind of thing. That's all very much in there. Also in a 4/4 bar, if you have a crotchet at the beginning of a 4/4 bar and a crotchet at the end, you can't put a minim rest in the middle. We have to have 2 crotchet rests in the middle so that the beat structure is clear and we can see all of the hierarchy of beats in there. Okay, also anacrusis. For grade 1, anacrusis is 1 beat. The syllabus says a 1 beat anacrusis. Well, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel, but what I am explaining is that students can actually use a pair of quavers as an anacrusis in grade 1. That's perfectly acceptable. Let's move on. Lesson 14, terminology. There was one thing I was just going to mention here, it's just a brief point. The syllabus says that students need to know the following terms and signs and their abbreviations. So often the way that the exams are set out to look like is that we give you an extract, we give you a melody, and it's usually covered with signs and terms, and we ask you what they are. Well, in recent years, one of the questions that we've done is we've actually asked students to write the abbreviation. So what I'm doing is I'm just reminding that you need to know the abbreviations as well as the full terms for grade 1 terminology. Let's move forward now into grade 2. Grade 2 begins with 2 chapters on all of the new scales. D major, A major, and then all of the minor scales. I start even now in grade 2 to organise things into the cycle of fifths. So there's diagrams in there showing how everything is starting to form a great big pattern, not just the names of the scales, but also the order of the sharps and flats. That's all reinforced from the base level. So there's lots of lovely diagrams in there to show you how that's all evolving. Another question I've had too over the years is that I had a question from a teacher who said that should we really be asking students to identify or to mark the tone and a half in a minor scale, because the syllabus says positions of tones and semitones. Now, theory people are just like this. They're very pedantic. And I said, well, okay, yeah, the syllabus says the positions of tones and semitones, but there's no way you can know a minor scale without knowing that the interval between 6 and 7 is a tone and a half. So I freely ask students to identify the tone and a half in a minor scale. Okay, let's move forward. Lesson 3, the intervals chapter. Now, just bear with me. People have different methods for teaching intervals. And I remember a colleague of mine said that she got her students to count up semitones to work out intervals. Now, I think that method is inherently flawed. And so I've just laid out my method in there for minor intervals, which is you always work from the major scale, and a minor interval is a semitone less than a major. That method has worked for me all through my teaching years, and I've just reinforced it here. I'd be interested to hear your stories about teaching intervals, but not now, later on. Okay, let's move forward to lesson 5. Lesson 5 is the new notes and figures in simple time. So this is the introduction of the triplet, the introduction of the 4 semiquavers all grouped together. Again, in this chapter, I talk a lot about strong beats and weak beats. There's a lot more material on beaming. I introduce the idea of in a 3/4 bar, when you have, say, 6 quavers, that you can beam them all together, as well as there are other variations of this. I talk about those as well. All right, and I think that's, yeah. The questions for each lesson come at the end of each one, and the way that we've written these questions is so that they actually match to a large extent the questions on the exam papers. So what we're doing is we're trying to move students towards what they're going to see on the exam paper. So there are a lot of questions at the end of that chapter that have the arrows, and they're asking for students to fill in, the note that's missing in the bar or the rest that's missing in the bar and that sort of thing. Okay, and then lesson 6, 6/8 time. Do any of you have students that get confused when you start to introduce 6/8 time? Yeah, some students just get it straight away, others it takes a bit longer. Again, I'm just reinforcing the concept of strong and weak beats, that there are 2 beats in a 6/8 bar, 3 in a 3/4 bar. And just, I've written lots of examples that use all the different figures in 6/8 time, just so that students get a feel for what 6/8 time is doing. All right, lesson 7. Lesson 7 introduces the quaver rest and also the semi-breve or the whole bar rest. And again, I talk about how you group rests, ideally in 6/8 time. In grade 2, if you're going to write a beat of rest in a 6/8 bar, according to the syllabus, you have to use a crotchet rest and a quaver rest. Sometimes we get candidates that write a dotted crotchet rest. Well, we all know that's correct, but it's not in the syllabus for grade 2. That's introduced at grade 3 level. So it's one of those things where we have a conundrum where some markers will say, that's wrong, that's not in the syllabus, and others will say, well, it is correct. But yeah, we always have to refer to the syllabus. It's, as I've mentioned before, it's not correct to put quaver rest, quaver rest, quaver rest. We can't accept that in 6/8 time. There's lots of material on it. Moving forward to lesson 9. So this is the form chapter. Binary and ternary form. What I've done in this chapter is I've put in quite a few examples where the sections don't have equal proportions. A lot of the time, you'll get students that just go for a ternary melody, A, B, A, like that, just at the beginning of all the lines there, ignoring things like anacrusis, ignoring the fact that the sections may actually be out of proportion with each other. So what I've done is I've gone in and explained this in a lot of detail, you know, the sorts of, and given examples of melodies where this happens, you know, where you can't expect everything to be regular all the time. Okay, and then lesson 10. Lesson 10 is an important one, and this is one where I felt like we really needed to pad it out. Accents in rhyming couplets. Now, in the exam, all they need to do is put in the accents. They need to draw in the accents. But in the book, I've actually I've encouraged students to think in terms of a rhythm, actually turning it into a rhythm, exaggerating all of the stresses, working out the scan of the text, and writing a rhythm. That's not in the syllabus. They don't have to do that. But I think it's a great tool for students to start thinking, even at grade 2 level, that they're going to be turning this into a written rhythm that is eventually going to need variation, and it's going to need to show creativity. So I've gone into a lot of detail, as I've said, to try and bring students through this whole process. And then lesson 11. That's the terminology. The terminology chapter. There's just two small things I want to talk about here, and the syllabus asks that the students should know what the various signs are, various accent signs are for grade 2. This has caused great confusion over the years. So what I've done is I've explained that at grade 2 level, an accent could be a tenuto mark, it could be a horizontal accent, or it could be a hat, it could be a marcato. So it could be any one of 3 things. And so if there was a melody and we had a note that had a tenuto sign over the top, if the student put what is this sign, an accent, we would mark that correct for grade 2. Even though it's a tenuto, it's not introduced yet. Grade 3 is where we introduce the concept of tenuto, okay? So just wanted to make that clear. Also, mezzo staccato at grade 2 level. Most students think that it's just staccato dots and a slur. Mezzo staccato can also be staccato dots and tenuti as well. So I've explained that in great detail as well. Okay, moving on. How are we doing for time, Leah? Great. Grade 3. I remember when I first saw the first proof of grade 3, I was sort of horrified because I just thought, is this really 120 pages long? It is, it's 120 pages long, and you'll soon see why. If we go into the first 2 lessons, we have all the new major and minor scales for grade 3. So that's E major, and then go all the flat scales all the way down to A flat. The minor scales, G minor, C minor. Again, I'm just giving students lots of information on how the cycle of fifths is all coming together, and you'll see it in the books. It's all drawn in a beautiful, beautiful circle. Strategies to remember all of the names of the sharps and the flats, these sorts of things. Lesson 3. Lesson 3 is the technical names of the notes in the scale. I don't know how you were all taught this, but I remember when I was first taught this, I remember my teacher saying, well, you just have to think about the words and the way the words are presented. So, you know, subdominant, because of the prefix sub, it sits underneath the dominant. And supertonic, super means ahead of, so it sits ahead of the tonic. Of course, that's great when you're little, but it's actually incorrect as to why the scale degrees are named like that. It's all to do with a triad going in the forward direction from the tonic, from the lower tonic, and then another triad going in the backward direction from the upper tonic. That's where that hierarchy comes from. I explain both of these things in the chapter, but not too much detail, so that I'm not bamboozling people. Let's go to lesson 4. Well, actually, no, lesson 4 is not on there, but I just wanted to make a little... The lesson 4 is actually the intervals chapter. I know, Leah, you're hating me right now, but I just wanted to say, in grade 3 is the first time we introduce the unison as an interval. Why? Because we do. No, it's because when you're talking about 4-part harmony, which comes later, you can't not know what the unison is. You have to know what the unison is. But years gone by, we've had some teachers say to us, you can't be putting the unison in grade 1 and grade 2. That interval doesn't exist, blah, 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 blah. It's just one of those things. We've felt that it's absolutely necessary to have it introduced by this point. There's also another thing about ledger lines. In grades 1 and grade 2, we expect students to know up to 2 ledger lines above and 2 ledger lines below the stave. At grade 3, they need to know all the ledger lines. Okay, there's just this unwritten thing that they will know how to extend up and below the staves with ledger lines at that point. So I'm just making that clear now. All right, moving ahead to lesson 4. Sorry, lesson 5. Whoops, no, what's the next one? It's lesson 7. Right, okay. The vocal ranges. I don't think a week goes by where I don't get some query about the vocal ranges for 4-part harmony. But I can sing higher than that, but I can sing lower than that. Well, yeah, sure. Any of you who are singers will know that you can sing much higher than G if you're a soprano, or much lower than F if you're a bass. What we're looking for it's the ranges of the average singing voice. Okay, so when we get 4-part harmonies that have like high B flats for sopranos or low Cs for basses, they're out of range for the average singing voice. We can't easily accept those sorts of notes. So I just reinforce what the ranges are. When these questions are being marked, we do allow latitude, don't we, Dr. Cruz? We do. So sometimes I get questions from people saying, but my textbook says that altos can sing up to D. That's fine, we accept that. Even though I've prescribed C as sort of like the upper limit for the alto voice. Perfect cadences, plagal cadences. Yes, there's a lot of material in there and I go into a lot of detail. My method for teaching cadences is to get a balanced spacing on the first chord, and then for the second chord, for each voice to move to the nearest available note. That was how I was always taught, and to minimise the part movement. That's what I was always taught. That's the method that I've outlined in the book. There are some teachers that like to promote a more creative way of doing cadences, but I've always said, like Gabriel Fauré, that you need to know the rules first before you break the rules, okay? So I've also sort of eased out the idea that perfect cadences have to be two voices rising and plagal cadences have to be two voices falling. That's not always the case, and I've put in examples where a whole series of compromises need to be made. So students need to know that these things are not set in stone, but they need to start thinking about musical results, that sort of thing. The big chapter that will probably, I don't know how people will respond to it, but the chapter after, chapter 9, where I talk about the faults in four-part harmony. This chapter caused me a fair amount of stress, I have to say. For example, in the Dulcie Holland book, she talks about consecutive octaves, consecutive fifths. She talks about overlapping as common faults in four-part writing. Well, she's right, obviously, and those are major ones. But I never felt that she went far enough. And so I actually have written stuff on hidden fifths, hidden octaves, sometimes called direct or exposed octaves, because they are wrong. And if we get harmonies from kids in grade 3 or 4 or 5, whatever, that have hidden octaves, hidden fifths, we mark them wrong. We can't look at those harmonies and say, well, in certain textbooks they don't talk about these things. Well, in the world, they are wrong, so we have to mark them wrong, and so therefore I've actually included material in this chapter about hidden fifths and octaves. So it looks like it's a fairly unwieldy chapter, but I think this stuff is really important, and I think I just felt that students need extra resources on all of this stuff. And the questions that come at the end of that lesson, which is lesson 9, include examples where the cadence is wrong, clearly wrong. They have to identify the fault and then they have to correct the fault. Okay, so hopefully that will you know, get people on the right track. All right, let's push on forward to lesson 10. Lesson 10 is on all of the new time signatures, note values, and rests. And yes, that's another big chapter for grade 3. So we've got the dot of augmentation being applied to rests, crotchet rests, quaver rests, the semi-quaver rest, all kinds of things. There's a lot of material in this chapter about grouping, beaming, again, encouraging students to try and think in terms of using the least amount of rests possible, that kind of thing. There's also, in the syllabus, it has data and datata as new figures that students should be knowing. Well, I've always sort of treated that as a springboard, so that in 6/8 time they can now learn da 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 dum, or da 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 da, or da 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 da, or da 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 da, or even da 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 da, that sort of thing. So I've put all this in the chapter as well. Sorry if I'm bamboozling you all with silly rhythms, but I felt it was important to go that bit further and explain that, well, it's okay for them to actually do this in 6/8 time. The syllabus doesn't explicitly say it, but you can do it because you've now learnt about beaming and you've learnt these new figures. Okay, so let's go forward to lesson 12. Lesson 12. Writing a rhythmic pattern to a couplet of words. Is this a big chapter? Yes, it is. I've gone into great detail about the way students should approach this. My system is always to work out whether the text scans better in 2s or 3s, to choose a time signature, to ascertain whether the text scans better slower or faster, to work out where to put in things like dotted rhythms, to put in quavers or semiquavers. Basically what I'm doing is I'm encouraging students to think about this as being an aspect of showing creativity. It's not okay at grade 3 level to just give me a line of crotchets for a rhythm, okay? And say likewise in 6/8 time, dum, da dum, da dum, da dum, da dum. And we get teachers who think that that's okay. It's not okay. Grade 3, where it says creative work in the syllabus. We're expecting to see evidence of creativity. So I'm outlining how I would approach that and how I would use some of the new rhythmic figures that are introduced for grade 3 in writing rhythms, okay? Next chapter, 13, sequence. This is not I don't need to say a lot about sequence. We all know what sequences are. There's just a particular example in this chapter that I wanted to draw people's attention to. We all know a sequence as it goes from bar to bar, you know, dum da dum 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 da dum 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 dum, this sort of thing. But they can also exist within a bar. But they can also happen when you've got an upbeat. Sequences can start from an upbeat into a bar, and they can sort of be, you know, there are other examples that we accept and that I've actually shown in the books, you know, just to encourage students to think, just to sort of open up their thinking about sequence. Okay, lesson 14, melody writing. Is this the longest chapter in the book? Yes, it is. I don't know how you all approach teaching your students to write melodies. What is a good melody? You know, we went through all kinds of conniptions when we were developing our online theory exams to get it to actually work out what a good melody is. In the end, we had to abandon it. So that's all done manually now. But a good melody, look, one thing that I've always encouraged my students to do is to sing their work, or to play it, or to listen to it at least, so that they can get some idea of what a decent melodic progression is, what a satisfying melodic progression is. So I've always done that. I know that a lot of you don't have the luxury of that amount of time in a theory lesson to actually go through all the nuts and bolts to encourage students to think about writing satisfying melodies. But I'm hoping that what I've done in this chapter, in giving a number of different models to approach writing melodies, that, you know, they may be able to work through it and enjoy doing it. A lot of students, you know, oh, I hate writing melodies. Oh, it's so hard. Oh, it's so boring. It's not. It's one of the best things you can do. So I've just tried to break it all down into little elements to help teachers and students. I feel very passionate about melody writing, and I think it's one of those parts of the syllabus that's really vital and important, and that kids should learn to love it. Okay. Yes, all the lesson 15. Lesson 15 introduces rondo form to binary form and ternary form. Again, I've just gone in and tried to show students how things are not always so straightforward and clear-cut. The sorts of things you're going to see in a rondo form in the episodes, in the B section, the C section, that indicate that show that they are different. Again, the use of anacruses, modulation, proportions that differ from one section to the next. I've gone into a lot of detail and given a lot of examples, written a lot of examples to try and show the sorts of things that you know, will hopefully encourage students to think about form as being a little more open than what they often do. Okay, and then to lesson 16. Oh, Leah, we're right on track. Lesson 16, terminology. I don't have much to say about this. Just one thing. A question for you. How many of your students get con anima and animato mixed up? They often do. We often see on exams that they get those two terms mixed up. It's just a thing. The one thing that I wanted to mention in grade 3 terminology is MM. We expect students to be able to tell us what that abbreviation means. MM, Meltzer's metronome. But for me, I think if a candidate wrote Meltzer's metronome on an exam, I wouldn't feel that that was enough, because that could be anything. I actually feel at grade 3 level that they need to say that it's something to do with beats per minute, keeping time, indicating tempo, that sort of thing. I would expect a second sentence. I would expect not just MM Meltzer's metronome, I would need to see a second sentence that indicates that they know what that actually means. Sometimes when we're looking at grade 5 papers, in the questions on recitative and aria, we'll get, the question will say something like, give an example of a work that contains an aria. And you'll get, Comfort Ye My People from the Messiah by George Frederick Handel, blah, 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 blah. They haven't answered the question properly. We need specific information. And this is something at grade 3 level that I've tried to reinforce. That's it for the books. I hope that's been informative. I hope I haven't sort of fried your synapses first thing on a Sunday morning. I just wanted to talk about what I would consider to be the newer aspects of these books, where the directions that I've sort of gone that are not in other books, that sort of thing. So thank you for listening. And I think that we're going to throw it open now to questions. For about half an hour or so, if we need it. I would encourage you to ask questions about the books, about the theory syllabuses, about anything really. So, who would like to ask a question? Yes?
What's the difference between master theory and these books?
Master Theory, the Dulcie Holland books? Well, I was hoping that going through all of this that I may have actually sort of made it clear. Our books are very closely aligned to our syllabuses as they are now. The Dulcie Holland books were written quite a while ago, and our theory syllabuses have changed. So these new books are up to date. Dulcie Holland, as she goes up, you get less and less examples. And one thing that I've made sure that we've done, and that's why the grade 3 book is 120 pages, is that I've made sure that you've got plenty of examples, not just in the lesson, but also in the questions, So at all the points along the road, I've tried to make sure that we are offering something that is different to what's out there, as well as collecting all the relevant information, but also just trying to strike out and answer questions that teachers have given us over the years to try and sort of fill that out and just give people a bit more material.
Just repeat the question that gets asked.
Oh, sure. Yes.
When was the syllabus written?
1750. I don't know. Sorry, I was just asked when the theory syllabus was written. I would say, Rita, quite confidently that it was set in stone pretty much back at the start. So the 1920s? Yeah.
It sounds to me as if it hasn't changed. Because everything that you said is saying, oh, it's not in the syllabus. So you've got this kind of slavish adherence to the syllabus.
Yeah.
But it hasn't been updated.
It has, but as anything sort of goes with the AMEB, dare I say this, change is slow. So the theory syllabus has changed, but it hasn't monumentally changed over the years. Sorry, Rita, did you want to say something here? No. No, no. It has, but just not a great deal. Yes.
What about someone was Blitz books in comparison?
Sorry.
Blitz books.
Oh, how do these compare?
Yeah.
How do these books compare to the Blitz books? The Blitz books, I would say, are aimed at younger students, and I thought with these books that what we would do is that we would try and just keep it fairly neutral, so that beginners or high school students or adults or even sort of people that want to have a look at theory sort of late in their life, that it could all be clear to them. you know, and it's sort of very neutral sort of tone. So I think that would be sort of be the main difference. Yes.
I'm just referring probably to a grade 1.
Yep.
One of the pages where you have two quavers, or 3, 4.
Yes. Yes.
Would you mark someone who puts 6 quavers joined together?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what I've said. One of the things that the syllabus is silent about is beaming. It doesn't say anything about beaming. And so the onus is therefore on the teachers to teach that in their lessons, to actually show students how things should be beamed. Well, I decided that all through these books that I would take opportunities to show how things should be beamed. So that very example that you're talking about, there's a whole page that says, well, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this, but not this, and this is why. All right, so that's all in the books. Yes?
You've got new 4, 5, 6 books as well?
Okay, have we got new 4, 5, 6 books? They are coming. They are coming, yes. So, yeah, I don't know. They might not be here by Christmas, but hopefully soon. Hopefully soon. Yes, we had a meeting about it on Friday.
Will they have answers as well?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Actually, what's the difference between the physical books and the online course materials?
Okay, that's an interesting question. The difference between the online courses and the books. The online courses don't have questions attached to them. What they have is they have a link that takes you into the practice tests that are in our software. So these books, all of the questions in these books are newly written, and I guess there's always been a difference between the written paper and the online paper in the way it's presented. The material's the same, but the online platform will break things down and sort of just, it'll look different, but the material's all the same. These books, I don't know, I feel like the art of actually writing music, handwriting music, is slowly getting lost. And I feel like these books very much make a case for continuing to handwrite music. I think that's the big difference. Hang on one second. Yes?
Many years ago when I did theory, I was changed onto musicianship.
Yes.
Of course, it was we were told that the theory syllabus was going to be deleted.
Yep.
And we were going to go to musicianship.
Yep.
Clearly it's not the case. And now we have music, craft theory and musicianship.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering what the thinking is behind that, having the 3 different strands of...
How long have you got? Well, as you outline it, musicianship was brought in to give the oral component, yes, and also to put focus on set works, the analytical approach. And I know that that's always been hugely popular in New South Wales. There are a lot of teachers who are quite evangelical about musicianship. So there's always been the two. Musicianship and theory are actually quite similar. Musicianship introduces some rudiments more quickly than theory. There's always been subtle variations, but I think the oral component is the main one. Music craft, I think, was developed to sort of fill in all the other holes, and to take a different tack, and explain things in a different way. So I don't know. Are there teachers here who teach from the music craft syllabus? Yes, yes. They're all very different, and
I know music craft is very different.
Yes.
Theory and
Yeah.
musicianship.
Oh, very much so. Very much so.
And I think theory is more if you want to go into composing, whereas musicianship is more, as you say, set works and oral work.
Yeah, true, but there are things in music craft that don't get introduced in the other 2 syllabuses. Like as you go up, there's species counterpoint and things like that. That's not covered in the theory syllabuses. So modes, oh, absolutely, yeah, and the different note naming system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it was just developed to show another aspect of teaching theory, because there are different ways of doing it. You know, they weren't sort of brought on. They weren't developed to sort of overtake the other. I think they were just sort of developed to have something new.
So I presume the three are going to continue the three different strands.
They are. Yes, they are. Yes, they are. Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
Maybe a silly question, but why is the oral attached to the musicianship rather than the theory?
I'm not sure I can answer that. I think that theory has always classically been just a written subject. Sorry, Rita, I think...
Sorry, can I just on that one?
Yes, yes, yes.
In New South Wales, musicianship was also used for HSC. Some of you my age might remember that, whereas the theory was never an HSC. Oh, sorry. In New South Wales, musicianship became part of the HSC component so that they could do musicianship, but not theory, and it became incredibly popular. We had something to do with it, at least in this state.
Because that oral is very
Yeah,
much
the oral,
involved
that's
in
right, and they
theory
do,
as well, isn't
yeah,
it?
and
Writing melodies
yeah,
is so
yeah,
much
yeah.
oral based.
Exactly. So I think that's really, I don't know about the other states, but certainly in New South Wales it was used for HSC, had both components.
So it's an historical reason, really.
Probably. Somebody's brainchild at some stage.
Yes.
On that, why don't you, or why doesn't the AMEB introduce oral earlier into musicianship, like it does for music craft? I mean, it's such an important thing of being a well-rounded musician, but we do it at 4th grade level.
Again, I think it's just one of the peculiar quirks of musicianship. You might remember that there was always the folk songs to memorise as well. I mean, some teachers were happy that those were gone. Me personally, I don't know. I think it was actually quite useful to memorise the folk songs. This is sort of, you know, musicianship always from fourth grade musicianship always had the memorisation of the folk song. I don't know. I just think it's just the way it's evolved. One of the particular quirks. I mean, music craft introduces oral material from preliminary. Music craft has a preliminary grade, and so there's oral material in that, and I think that's fantastic. And I've always felt that, you know, music it has to be something that you hear, not just something that you write. And so you actually need to be able to hear it when you're writing it, you know. So I guess, just coming back to other questions, I guess I've always encouraged my students to get involved, to listen, to play, to sing what they're doing, even if it's very basic, as a fundamental thing, I guess. So the answer to that question is, I don't know.
The other question was just simply on beaming.
Yes.
Talked about grouping 6 quavers together
Yep.
in 6/8.
Yep.
Do you not look at strong beats and medium beats as well?
We do.
So
Yep.
are you able to cross over those, or do you try to keep those clearly identified?
Sorry, the question was about medium beats as well as strong and weak beats. I have absolutely covered that in the books. The concept of medium beats is there. It's fundamental to the whole process of learning rhythms. Yes?
Yeah, a couple of years ago I had a student and we wanted her to do the online exam, and she ended up sort of quitting before, I think. But at the time, the online system was really not user-friendly, and I said, you can do it if you and your father, who was more computer savvy, can work it out. And
Okay.
she said it was really difficult, but one of my colleagues told me that since it is better, but I don't have the time to kind of muck around and look at, so I just want to ask you if that's changed.
Yeah. Well, I think version 1.0, as I'll call it, yeah, we were basically sort of going out into territory that, you know, people hadn't gone to before. So we were trying to develop it as we were going, and yeah, it was a long and protracted process, and maybe there were elements of it that weren't entirely successful. I always thought that sort of dragging one note across for every note in a scale was very time consuming, but we've changed that now. Version 2.0 has a lot of a lot of changes across the board, and it should be a lot more user-friendly, and it should also be a lot less time-consuming. So I would encourage you to have a look at the new one. Yeah.
One question I'm always asked is, how can you do this online without cheating? Does it have to be monitored?
Yeah, it does. It does. There's a. Sorry. Oh, the question is about cheating on online exams. Oh, I think Rita wants to answer that one. Yes.
Was that from you?
Yeah.
I have a stock answer for it. If they're cheating, why are they getting 32%? Why are they getting 58%? Okay? Why are they not passing, in other words, if they're cheating? Because if they were cheating, they would be getting 100% or 98%, would they not? Do you agree? You know, when I'm marking online exams, I often have students who are getting 36%, 22%. I had one that got nil the other day. Okay?
Oh, wow.
So that's my answer. And as we all know, even with the face-to-face exams, kids can cheat, students can cheat. There was a case at the con not that long ago where they discovered that the mobile phones up the sleeve with the answers, or with the material on it. So no, it's no different on online.
So how do you know that the 99% the ones that get 99% haven't cheated?
Don't know, but I don't know that if I'm marking a face-to-face exam either.
Can I suggest in relation to that, where do the children live who are getting 33% or 0%? Do they have teachers, or are they in like outback areas?
We don't know that. We have no idea. When we're marking, we have a number. That's it. 0002. 00 or something.
Yeah. I know someone who's an examiner, and she says children that perhaps are in more outlying areas perhaps don't have access to
It's got nothing to do with it. I'm sorry, but it's got nothing to do with it. We don't know where they are.
I'm just saying that maybe
that could be for anything.
It could be for anything, and I must say that there are exams that come to me for remarking, and the first thing I think when I look at it is, does not have a teacher.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all the creative stuff is just a complete washout. So yeah, it does not have a teacher. Yes.
This is in the past. I've had some students do theory exams online, get 100%, and at the end of the thing, it actually fails, as in the whole thing just shuts down as if you haven't done it. So they've had to redo the exam.
When was that?
That was probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and it's happened 2 or 3 times.
Yeah.
Luckily, it was an early grade.
Yeah.
So they just redid it straight away. It was okay.
Yeah, that would have been the earlier version of the online exam. The newer version is much better.
Recently, and it's all been fine.
Yeah. See, this I can only just reinforce what I said before about developing this thing sort of completely just going into the void, because these sorts of platforms, these sorts of exams, they're not being done. They're not sort of being done with that much confidence. But we've gone out there and we've tried to build this from the bottom up, and we're going to we continue to refine it and to build it and look for upgrades all the time. So we're very pleased with what we've been able to achieve, and it's actually taken quite a while. Yes.
Just back onto your question about kids in the country, I've just been reminded the theory courses for first, second, and third grade. That's what they can do, and that gives them, all the background and the actual courses that they need.
I wasn't meant to be a criticism.
Oh, no, don't take it. You can't criticise me.
No.
I just take the flak.
There's so many variables.
Oh,
that you can only do your best.
Absolutely. It's all. It's recognised. That's how it is. Yeah.
Yes.
You say that in grade 2, for 6-8 time, you can't use dotted punctured rest.
Yeah.
I find that quite frustrating because if you're saying to a student, correct way is to put a dotted punctured rest, but
right.
It means that you can't.
Yep.
So, isn't there some sort of flexibility?
Oh yeah, there would be. I think that it would be a very pedantic teacher that would say this is wrong. I mean, most of them, I get most of the markers. I think if they were looking at it, they would automatically say correct, But according to the syllabus, is not correct. It's like that thing that I said about using a minimum rest to indicate a whole bar of rest in 2/4 time. Well, in grade 1, that's all you've got. That's all the syllabus gives you. So that has to be the correct answer. You know. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. We would welcome your feedback. Yeah.
Sorry. Andrew, we have a question from a viewer online.
Yep.
From our live stream. So Alia has asked, in reference to the grade 2 theory,
Yep.
the terminology at this level refers to accents, but if a student is asked to name a tenuto in an exam, will
Yep.
the student be marked wrong if they answer tenuto and not accent?
At grade 2 level,
Yeah.
would they be marked wrong if they said it was a tenuto? I doubt it. Yeah, I doubt it. Yeah. See, this is the peculiar quirks of the syllabus. Yeah. Yes.
So that's still, I mean, has a cloud over it. All those answers on,
Yep.
you know, this one. Oh, probably it should be, but you know, as a theory teacher, do we really have to worry about these quirks?
Look, I think the answer that I usually give is that if the answer is musical, and if the answer makes sense, it'll get full marks, even if it is in advance of the syllabus. Okay, I think that's just how it has to be. And as you go up, for example, I mean, there are so many grade 5 harmonies that come back to me that have dominant sevenths in them. You know, in perfect cadences. Now, dominant sevenths are not in the syllabus for grade 5, but if they've done it really well and everything resolves correctly, we can't take marks off. So I think that's just what we have to do here. That if the result is musical, we can't really mark it wrong, even if the syllabus says it's not allowed. There are teachers who are extraordinarily pedantic. Now, there's another example that comes to mind here, and that is the use of the natural sign in the C minor scale. If we ask you to write a C minor scale without a key signature, and the student puts in a natural sign in front of the B, well, that's actually technically incorrect. The natural sign is completely redundant because it's not cancelling anything. So there are teachers that say, well, 2 out of 3. In redundant use of the natural sign. And that's something we see time and time again. Students that just sort of like rote copy the answer and don't think about the answer, but the use of the application of the natural sign is incorrect. So we actually have to take a mark off, even though if you looked at it, if you played it, the notes would be correct. You know, it's one of those shadowy sorts of things. Yes, any more questions? Yes. Yes.
For leading note, it seems to me in the theory papers that leading note always need to go to tonic.
Yes.
But then in music class syllabus, it was said that if leading note, if we approach the leading note from above, then the leading note not necessarily solve to tonic if it's going down.
Okay. This is. Yeah. Okay. The question was about the resolution of the leading note. Now this is actually sort of more, I'd say more grade 4, grade 5 theory. But it's an interesting question nonetheless because it's one it's a problem that comes up again and again and again. Now, if you look at the chorales of Bach, the leading note often falls to the dominant. Particularly at the end of a phrase or at the end, but I can also give you examples where the leading note goes up to the mediant. So it's not set in stone. You have to look at the way the line progresses. So the leading note for preference should resolve up, but it can also resolve down, and in some cases it can resolve up to the mediant. So again, it's not clear cut. The result has to be musical. There has to be a logic to what's going on there.
So will the student mark wrong if they use correctly?
Yep.
Solving downward is right, but not going to tonic. Will they be marked wrong?
Again, if the result is if the result is musical and makes sense, I doubt that they would be marked wrong because the people that are marking the papers know all the Bach chorales and they know that these rules are just, you know, they get broken all over the place. I think, yeah. I mean, look, I would always encourage my students to try and resolve the leading note up, but you know, there in certain situations, that might not be the best thing to do. You just don't know. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that sort of opens up a discussion of how you actually do resolve the leading note, because if you go F sharp to G, okay, if you're in the key of G major, F sharp to G, that's what you would prefer to do. But I know a lot of melodies that go F sharp, D, G, they fall down to the dominant and then go up to the tonic. So there's many ways of doing it. There's a lot of subtlety in there, and I really don't want to say you must do it this way all the time. It's just not the way it gets done out in the in the real world. It's handled with a lot more subtlety. Yeah. Yes.
You talked earlier about hidden dominance. Can you just explain?
Oh, hidden fifths. Sorry. Hidden fifths and octaves. Okay. How many people know what hidden fifths and octaves are? Okay. I don't know if we have enough time. It's when I'll just try and yeah, I'll do a simple example. It's when the outer voices, the bass and the soprano, both move towards an exposed fifth, but the soprano does it by leap. If it's by step, it's not a hidden fifth. But if they leap any interval more than a tone, that's exposed. That's an exposed fifth or a hidden fifth, and that's considered to be wrong. So if both the bass and the soprano are leaping up to an exposed fifth, and the soprano is leaping up by an interval more than a step, it's an exposed fifth, a hidden fifth. Okay. Yeah, that's in the textbooks. That is a no-no. You don't do that. There are, of course, examples where I know that composers have done that, but the voice leading in the other voices covers it. So again, it's not, you can't say you must not do this. There are situations where it can be modified. See, this is what studying harmony is all about. You know, it's endless variations are possible. But in classical, you know, in the textbooks, hidden or exposed octaves and fifths are you don't do them. You get marked down for doing them. Any more questions? Yes.
I'd just like to say that I've been teaching for a very long time, and I tend to use lots of different books. I use maybe 3 different books. So I'm looking forward to looking at these. Yep. Because maybe it'll bring those things together. And it's about time we've had a theory book that goes with the course. Yeah. Well, I mean, sorry. The question was it's not really a question. It was just a statement. I use like bits of Trinity College. Yep. And as I say, Alfred's the theory book that goes with the piano books. And Dulcie Holland, and I mix them all together. Yep. So I use different things. Yep. So I'm looking forward to this to see how good. Well, look, I would welcome your feedback. I mean, as I said before, it's certainly been the result of a very long process of fermentation, shall we say. It's been on our minds for a long time, and you know, it certainly draws on my experience as a teacher, you know, just sort of knowing the sorts of things that students do or are inclined to do in their lessons. So yeah, I'm very pleased with them. I think they've come up very well. I'm happy with the questions in there, but I would welcome your feedback, and I hope that you enjoy looking at them, using them. Yeah, we're looking forward to extending the series upwards, 4, 5 and 6, to sort of, you know, get a whole suite of publications for theory in stone. Yes? Will you be doing these books for musicianship as well? At this stage, I don't think so. I mean, there's always that sort of aspect of the oral part. I mean, I don't know how you've approached this, but I mean, there's never been a text for musicianship. I will always. I mean, there is now. There's just the one, but you know, classically, teachers have just had to make it up on the fly. You know, all of the oral stuff. I mean, I know I've certainly done that. You were saying before something about there being an oral, maybe put together a course for oral. Well, I don't know. I think I'll have to take that back to the federal office, and we'll have a talk about it, because I would certainly support that. I would certainly support that. You know, in an online environment, it might be possible to really
again, to give this sort of a wider access as well.
Thank you. I think that's all we have time for. I just wanted to thank everyone here for coming firstly, and can we thank Andrew for his presentation today.
Thank you. Thank you.
The books for those that are here will be available just upstairs. Jackie will be able to help you out. Please join us in light morning tea. And thank you for everyone who joined us online for the live stream. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.